Welcome to Fierce, Fun, Feminine, and Other F Words. I'm Christine Elizabeth, and I help women unstuck themselves. Today's episode is about infidelity inside a faith-based marriage. We hear from Lisa Devine, mother of 5, who suffered from not only one incident, but multiple incidents of infidelity with her loving husband. She found herself on the floor of her bathroom contemplating whether she wanted to live another day. I want you to approach this episode with an open mind, understanding that we all come from different faiths, different stories, different wants and needs, and all of us can end up on the other side in a journey that helps us feel more in line with our own truth. Lisa found a way to thrive. She had to tap into some serious fierceness and bravery to get there. I hope you're inspired by her story. Let's listen. I'm so excited about our guest today because she is sharing a real and raw, very personal story of her before and after through infidelity. This is Lisa Devine, born and raised, living in Michigan, married for 26 years, mother of 5. And she has so much to share. I don't want to take up any more time. I want to get Lisa going. So Lisa, welcome to this podcast. Thank you for being here.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tell me a little bit about your marriage and how you met your husband and what the beginning of your marriage was like.
So we met at college at Michigan State University in the elevator, actually. And I thought he was very strange because he kept talking to me and he was in his pajamas. And I thought, gosh, this is a very odd guy. And so kind of he sort of, I would say, sort of chased me for that first year. And I literally, the other girls in the dorm that knew him from the year before said, stay away from that Jeff Devine. And I thought, okay, I will. Well, by the next year, he was crying one day, telling me something about his childhood. And so it just got me in the heart. So from there, we just kind of started a romance. And, I finished school. He did drop out of school and went back to live with his parents for a little while, but we ended up getting engaged, and he hadn't gotten what I considered a real job yet. So I told him, well, I'll go to grad school and we can get married after that. So, kind of get your life together. And so he ended up wanting to be a police officer like his dad, and was kind of afraid to apply for the state police. So I sort of did it for him. And he ended up getting an interview, and from there was able to, take charge on his own. And we got married shortly after. For me, I had become a Christian when I was in high school, but had walked away from my faith all through college. And about this time, I really wanted to come back to that. And I had sort of what I said, put Jesus on a shelf. And I said, I'll come back to you later, Jesus. And so at this time, I really wanted to get serious about my walk with the Lord again. And so I shared that with Jeff. And he also, he ended up going to like a conference with my dad, and he ended up putting his faith in Christ as well. And so, it was kind of like this storybook wedding where we were both Christians and we were happily getting married. Unfortunately, we had, we had sex before we were married. And for me, that ended up being a very, like guilt-ridden thing. It was like, once we got married, I struggled with the guilt of that. And I think that baggage that I brought in from just other previous, relationships and things that I had brought into the marriage, that definitely set the stage for me to struggle in that area. And I was also very much a perfectionist. So, if I wasn't being good, then, I struggled with that.
Okay. Can I pause you right here?
Yeah.
Because we know that he went on to be a police officer, but what did you study? Because you said you went into grad school.
Yes. So I got a bachelor's and a master's degree in social work. And I did work in the field for a short time. I never ended up, back then, they didn't have the same licensing situation as there is now. So I never was really actually licensed. I worked for a short time, but I was really, excited about having children. And so at the time, we ended up having our first son when I think we've been married 2.5 years. And so I chose to stay home, and I just was very led to Well, actually, that's how I met you, Christine, right? For having home births. So I actually had all 5 of my kids at home, and yeah, and then I homeschooled them all. So I
like
just,
super mom.
what was that?
You're like super mom.
Well, people think that I'm a little weird, but I'm okay with that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You do it the way you do it. You just painted a picture of young people. You were very vision oriented. It sounds like go get a job. You need to get your act together. I'm not going to marry you.
Mm-hmm.
On his feet, but you both have great jobs. Your degrees in social work, and you seem like you're involved in your church and you're family centric, right?
Yes.
So everything is
that's very good summary. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So, now you have your first son, and we're getting ready to get into your story. And I want you to just be able to share your story, because we know, our listeners know, that we're here talking about infidelity. So I'm going to just let you go. And if I find anything that just sparks interest, I'm going to just, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to hit pause really quick to have you enlighten us a little bit more and share more on that part. But I want to just hear a little bit about what happened, because it sounds like you were happily married in the beginning, and you were aware of your perfectionism and all of those things, but it sounded like you were both on the same page. So I'm going to just let you go.
Yeah. So we were very happily married. We were very in love, and now I can tell you that there were red flags back then, that I either kind of chose to ignore, or I just really didn't think were a big deal. But now I would know they were. So he ended up getting that job with the state police, and we ended up getting, sent from the academy. We were located into a small rural area, a rural town of Michigan. And so we kind of just set up this kind of, I don't know, picture perfect white picket fence type life in this little small town. And we were very happy. And we had the 5 children in a 10-year period. So I was pregnant and nursing for 10 years, pretty much. And and again, I just threw myself into that. I just threw myself into being a mom and homeschooling. I just was very, I guess, convicted to do that. I just was really into it. It was my life, and I made it my full-time job very seriously. And we loved our family life and, our church life and all of that. It's really that simple for me. I was chasing after the Lord. I was doing my very best to be a great wife and to be a wonderful mom. And that was my goal. And I was, doing my best to do that. Meanwhile, my husband, was working in this job that brought, he's, the whole PTSD thing of cops, I think it's a real thing. The stuff that he dealt with over the years, just he really didn't have a healthy way of handling it and handling his stress. And, again, in hindsight, it's easy to tell this now, because I can know now. At the time, this is what was happening. He compartmentalized, hyper compartmentalized, not a normal healthy way of doing that, but hyper, where he describes it as warehouses in his brain. His brain was a warehouse, and he was able to put everything in boxes, and so that's how he dealt with maybe a really nasty, scene at work, or terrible things that have happened to children, and the stuff that he had to deal with, that really caused him a lot of stress. But early on, we had different things that came up, though, that I was not aware of. For example, pornography came up early in my marriage, and it was something my dad had to tell me about, because he's the one that discovered it, or my sister-in-law told him, or something along those lines. And so it was, just this horrifying thing that I had to deal with. And all of a sudden, my perfectionism kicks in. I'm not good enough. What's wrong with me? I must be more perfect. And so we kind of worked through that, at least I thought we did, huh?
Right. So was that an escape for him, and how he was dealing with maybe some trauma at work? Okay.
Yes. It was also a coffee table reading in his home growing up. Okay. So it was something that he had already developed at a very young age, probably 12, 13, 14 years old. It became his escape and way of dealing with things. And along with the behavior that goes along with that.
Right. So if a woman is married and discovers pornography, that her spouse, or if vice versa, anyone is involved in pornography, I mean, is that a precursor to an affair, or can it stop there? Is that something that's a red flag?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of different opinions on that, but to me, I consider pornography having an affair to some degree, because sex is in marriage is to be an intimate thing between two people. And you're right, because what that does is it takes away from what God really intended for you to have. It actually hurts your intimacy. It causes them to really it keeps them from learning how to be intimate. Let's put it that way. Okay. So therefore they can't do that very well with a real person then.
And so you had to tackle the pornography issue.
We did. But again, I was young and not super educated on that. Like, I knew I didn't like it. I knew it made me feel terrible, but I really didn't understand the real depths of what it does to people.
Do you think he let it go at the time?
Well, yeah. So he would control it, I think, and he would work at it, because you know what? He really truly loved the Lord too. This is what we came to understand was a true addiction for him that he wanted to stop. So I would not say that it's always a precursor that they're going to do something further, but if it's somebody that is already really entrenched, generally speaking, addictions need more. They need something more. They need riskier behavior. They need whatever, something to get a deeper high,
Okay. So next?
So, we kind of worked through that, and then the internet came along, and I remember, he would be in chat rooms, and I just, that whole thing came along, and we had to kind of work through that. And so it was just a constant, a discussion, a constant struggle, I was constantly working on, trusting him and trying to love him and be who I was supposed to be to him. And he really was trying to do that too. But, and life happened. Life was still happening, and it was good. We really had a good life. We did all the things, right? Like, we've always been good communicators. We've always been going on dates. And honestly, we did have and have had a really good and fun. We're friends. We love doing a lot of the same stuff. We just do crazy things, and we have a great time together. But this was just kind of this underwriting thing that constantly happened, or constantly bothered me, or come up in some way or another. The next thing that happened is we were 10 years, I think, into our marriage. And at that time, I had been doing a lot of personal work, a lot of work on myself, on my guilt, right? Forgiving myself, and just really doing a lot of work in that way. And it was allowing me to love my husband better. I was really working on that. He went away to a training in Florida, and he was gone for 2 weeks. And I didn't find out until 3 months later, but he had a 2-night stand with a waitress down there. And, so that was the shattering of my heart, where, he called me from Colorado, actually, to tell me, because he had taken my son to a father-son retreat with with a friend and his son. And he called me in the night to tell me this. And it just became such a horrifying reality that I couldn't. And I will say, and this is what I learned. Okay, so here's one thing that I learned this time, because we didn't really seek help. We were single income. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was the couponing type. And I was embarrassed. I wanted to protect him. I didn't want anybody to know that about him, because I figured it would make me look bad too, right? It would make what's wrong with me. I didn't want my parents to know, who lived next door to us. We're very intertwined with them. And so we basically ended up not getting any outside help. We did not tell anybody other than like a couple of very close friends. And it took me, and I had 2 years probably of utter, that's when I learned what anxiety was like. That's when I learned what anxiety and panic attacks were like. And just trying to homeschool my kids, trying to love my family, and try to act like nothing was wrong, like when I was with other people. And that was a very long, arduous time in my life. And I would say it took me about 2 or 3 years to feel sort of normal, like feel like myself again. And a good 7 or 8 years to really heal. And it's funny, because that's a really long time, and we were living life and raising kids and still doing a good life. But like, I somehow was simultaneously, juggling all of that, but still really like working hard on myself and really trying to get to the place where I could forgive and I could love the way God wanted me to. Like that was the way my brain was working. And I know it was about 7 or 8 years because I journal. And I wrote in my journal, thank you, Lord, for, what you've done and how you've healed me. And I just know, I don't like this idea, but I just know someday we're going to be like in a fishbowl. Like I'm going to have to tell this story. And little did I know that was only going to be a small part of the story, because I thought that was the worst it could be.
Oh gosh.
And it wasn't.
Did you correctly that he confessed it to you? You didn't find out secondhand. He confessed that he did it.
Correct. Yes. For this one. Yeah. He was like listening to a sermon or something at that retreat, and, was overcome.
Okay.
And called me.
What happens to you when you have a home full of kids, daddy comes home, and you're playing house, and you, Lisa, are in there having this truth that you're trying to wrestle with and be mom and be a teacher and all the things you're doing? What does that look like for you? What does that feel like? How did you operate from hour to hour? And how did it affect you when the kids were asleep and you were alone with your husband?
Yeah. Well, I will say at this time, the oldest child was 7, and we hadn't had the youngest one yet. So they were like, 7 and down. Okay. So they were still little enough that I was able to keep it under wraps for them. I just really did my day, and I really, really, really lean heavily on my time with the Lord every morning. And
so you were powering through. You were just powering.
I just powered through on that one. Exactly. Because like I said, I wasn't getting any other help, and I couldn't even talk to my mom about it or anything,
Did your mom know?
No, she never knew. Well, she didn't know until years later when the next blow up happened. So
yeah. So there's what happened next. Then there's more to.
So anyway, yeah. So we're talking. So 7, 8 years go by, right? And we're doing great. I mean, we are doing so great. I have grown so much. I've learned a lot, and I would say that I 100% trusted him again. Like I got to that point, maybe 99%. Like it was good, like close. And we were just having a great time, and life was good. And that particular summer ended up just being the best summer of our lives because, we didn't get to travel a ton, but we tried to do what we could because I'm big on experiences, right? So we piled all the kids in a camper and went out west and did the big trip for my son because he was graduating from high school that year. And so we had this wonderful, awesome, amazing summer. We had an amazing graduation party for him, just like, a couple hundred people. And it was just so much fun. And I just was having the time of my life. And then that summer we were getting together with lots of friends and camping with them and just having so much fun. And then that fall we took our son to Florida to college. So it was like my first baby, leaving the home, and he went all the way to Florida. So it was just a big year, and a lot happened, but yet it was so good. It was just really good. And we got back from Florida, and without going into too much detail, basically, my husband got a call or a text from somebody I'm going to say the other couples, the husband, basically he found out somehow, she told him, whatever. Anyway, so he decided to tell me that night that he had an inappropriate texting relationship with somebody. So he was confessing that. Well, based on our past experience already that I've already lived through with him, 20 years, I wasn't real happy about that. And, but I said, you know what? I just went to bed and I was angry, but I got up the next morning and I got in my chair and I was praying, talking to the Lord. And can I tell you a really quick story? So the day before, there's lots of little ins and outs that are so cool that are God stories. I know we don't have time for all of them, but I was praying the day before about the verse in Corinthians about all these 3 things remain: love, hope. Love, how's it go? Love, hope, and faith.
Yeah.
Love, faith, and hope. Yeah. And I'm sorry, should have had it written down. But anyway, so I just remember thinking, I heard God tell me, you're doing really great with like faith and hope right now, but you're going to really need to work on love. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. So somebody had piano lessons that afternoon. So I went over to the library and spent another half an hour working on that verse. And I journaled. I said, I copied it down and I wrote down, God, please help me love Jeff, with your love. Okay. Now, the next day is when I hear this news. And so that's just a little snippet of how God worked and how he prepared me, I feel, in some ways. But I also really feel like there were a lot of ways, symbolisms that had happened that I felt like we were really under attack. Like just, we want, the enemy really wanted to destroy us. And so anyway, I was praying that morning and I was like, I just knew, basically if he doesn't get his life together, I just knew in my heart that there was something else, so he had left, he'd given me a kiss and gone to work. And I texted him and I said, if there's anything else, you better let me know. I said, because your sin will find you out. And he replied with, my sin has found me out, because he had gotten another call that, life had blown up in the other camp. So that was the shattering, that I had never, it didn't even touch the first one, because, I had worked so hard to trust him again. Mm-hmm. And I just, and now you're right. Now your question of how did I get up and deal with my kids? This is where that became extremely difficult, because they were older, they were teenagers, and I could not hide it.
Yeah. So when you
no, because I was so much more, I don't want to say I was more broken, because I was very broken the first time, but this time it took a toll on me that was just not hideable. I couldn't hide it.
Okay. I have a couple questions. Is it okay if I?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So when you say it blew up in the other camp, do you mean that the other side, the other family, somebody found out, so it was a married person he was involved with? Is that what you meant by that?
Correct. Yes. Okay. And that's who called him. Yeah.
Okay. So then you found out it was more than a texting relationship?
Correct. It had been going on for 6 months, and it was one of the people that we'd been hanging out with all summer.
So there's a double betrayal there.
Yes. Yes.
That shines a whole other light. So you're not just dealing with the betrayal and the trust in your marriage. It's also betrayal and trust from a friend.
Correct. And I lost friends because of that. Like certain friendships had to end because of it as well. And it just was devastating to me.
I'm sorry that you went through that. And I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with people you don't even know, in hopes that we can help them through their story, because this is huge. Mm-hmm. What you're sharing is huge. So now I imagine when the kids are out of the house, you and Jeff are not so warm and cozy.
No, nope. And, I don't know. It's hard to tell this story because I don't want to give you all sorts of unnecessary details, really. But, it just became, I was in shock. I've done a lot of, obviously in that last 5 years, I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of books. I've read books. we've been to conference. I've learned a lot. And this is called betrayal trauma. And really, it is a trauma. Many, many women who experience this actually have a form of PTSD, at least for a time, when it lasts so long. But all of the physical symptoms, and you really, really think you're crazy. You really think you're going crazy. But I could not control what my body was doing. It was, and I'm sure lots of other trauma victims of various kinds, have experienced that or something like that. But, and I'm always has just been a relatively, kind of stable person. Right. And now I felt like I was literally going crazy because I couldn't, I had trouble going in public. And, so I will say though, I how I mentioned we didn't get any help the first time. This time what happened was, and I mean, almost the very first words out of my mouth were, go next door and tell my parents what you did right now. Go tell them what you did. Right. Because I just knew, first of all, I was not going to survive if I had to hide this. Right. And my parents, we're really close, and, we have a really good relationship. And, I don't know, I just needed that done. And I was like, and you're doing it. I'm not, you did this. So you're going to tell him. And so, I stayed home and he went, and that was kind of the beginning. And, we asked my dad and another older friend of ours that lives in another city, Jeff called him, and he started calling him on a weekly basis for accountability and stuff. But we asked them both, please find us I said, yes, you actually you have to go get help immediately, we asked them each to find somebody that specialized in this, because at this time I knew, okay, we're dealing with sex addiction here, because he had told me other things, about his boxes and the fact that he was working so hard to get people to like him, everybody but me, right? As a person he should have cared most about. But, so independently, these two men that live 3 hours apart came up with the same therapist that is in a completely different city in another direction. So we knew that this was where he needed to go. So, we did these 1.5-hour drives of me screaming and hollering at him because I was so terrified to even let him go anywhere alone at this point. I mean, it was just like trauma, Christine. I can't explain it any other way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that all went forward.
How long were
What was that?
How long were you in counseling with this?
Well, we didn't really go together. I drove with him, but I only went in there actually once with him. And I think he went maybe 6 or 8 times over the course of a year, because like I said, it was quite expensive. We had to pay cash, like I said, single income, we were driving far. Right. But also the therapist said he literally never had a guy come in and fall on his sword like Jeff did. And I really think that is another key. And, we can heal whether or not the other person does. But I think one of the things that helped me a lot is, and that not everybody necessarily gets to have, is that he fell on his sword this time. He did not try to blame me in any way, shape, or form. He completely saw and understood what he had done. He saw and has understood how much he has hurt me, and what he stood to lose, and all of that. So, because I've had a lot of people ask me, gosh, why did you stay with him, after a second time? And I can't really explain it other than, my kids and my God, and that Jeff, he changed immediately. And he visibly, I could see him working, he would get up every day and do his Bible, do Bibles. He vigilantly, if that's a word, spent a year, where I could see him working. Now, was I wonderfully happy? No, of course not. But I'm just saying that's what kept me in the game, because I could see that God was working, that he was working. And so I was willing to give him that one last chance, because for my family and for my kids. And I didn't want to lose all the investment that we put into our life together.
I have to ask you, did you ever say, get your act together, or the kids and I are out? Did you ever do that? Did it even cross?
You mean after this happened?
Yes.
After. I always told him that, and to this day, I still say this, basically 3 strikes and you're out. So if there's ever another time, I'm out, buddy, so, no, I never really did threaten to leave at this, per se. And we didn't separate or anything.
Decision to stay. Did you ever wrestle with that and feel bad for that decision? Or were you resolute and moving forward? Did you ever have that internal dialogue where you were wrestling in your own head? Like, am I doing the right thing?
I would say, and again, everybody's journey and story, and there's so many different factors that are different for each person. But for me, no, I really did not wrestle with that. I made a decision right away that I was going to see this through, again, unless, there was some major relapse or something. Okay. But he has been steadfast, and it's been 5 years now. So, awesome. That was one of those things that, you can't judge by words. You have to judge by behavior. And, that only can be seen in time. I will say this is a neat little story though. The night that it blew up, I mean, I went about my life that day because I was walking around like a zombie. Like I was in shock. Like I think I had a chiropractic appointment that day, and we had church that night, and it was just so overwhelmingly horrible. But that night he's like, well, do you want me to sleep somewhere else? And I was like, I don't care. It's your bed. Like I was just very whatever. And so, we went to bed. Well, I woke up in the middle of the night. See, this is why I think answers that question of why I never really wrestled about leaving, because this is what the things that would happen. So in the middle of the night, I woke up at like 4 a.m. and I was just kind of praying and God was like, Jeff does not understand my love. Because what I also learned was Jeff said that he's always felt like God didn't love him. And that was, I think, that is one of his biggest problems that he had, that he was always trying to fill that God hole with other things, because he never really thought God could love him because of all the bad things that he had done and just what a horrible person he was. Like, but I never knew that he felt like this, but he told me that day, the day it blew up. So that's why I just learned that from him that day. So in the middle of the night, God says, Jeff doesn't know I love him, and the only way the way he really understands love is physical touch. And so, I just really felt the Lord telling me that I needed to give him a kiss and tell him, that God loves him. And I was like, are you kidding me, God? Like, oh my gosh. Like there was just no way I wanted to do that. Right. I didn't want to touch him. And, so try to make that long story short, in the morning, at like 6 o'clock in the morning, I just couldn't get rid of that. Like, I just knew I had to do that. And so I kind of woke him up and I gave him a kiss and said, God loves you. And I did 3 of them with a different thing, that he's not going to leave you and that he forgives you. And so that was kind of the very beginning because he broke down in sobs. Jeff he said he just broke down in sobs because he realized that God really did love him, because I did that for him. Well, I did that because God led me to. I would have never in my right mind had done that on my own. So I feel like there's things like that happen that I knew God was in it, and I was in this, but it was a very, very ugly, not pretty, walk for years to come, but I still just kept showing up.
You did. Okay. And you guys, through this whole time, you were involved in your church?
We were involved in that. Well, kind of, we ended up staying at that church for a year. This is where my story gets funny. Well, this will be kind of the healing part now, because, I was struggling to homeschool at that point because I wasn't functioning well. I was very much curled up on the bathroom floor in a fetal position for many hours, and I truly did in this process have suicidal thoughts, and it was a very long and dark, horrible time. And it was very hard for me to get up and go do school with my kids every day. And so I kind of made it through that school year, because this was September. So I made it through that year kind of. And, but we wanted to put the youngest in the private school that was here in town. And so I didn't have money to do that. So I decided I would go get a job, and I have this professional degree, but I'd been out of the field for so long. I did not feel prepared, and especially not mentally ready to be able to handle anything like that. So I took a job cleaning toilets at a local church. And that was how I went back to work. And so that I could pay for him to go to school, because I couldn't do it. And the other kids were a little older, so they could do more on their own. So I remember that summer, I went to a life coaching training that I had signed up before this had happened, because I am always into self-growth and learning. And I was just really interested in learning about life coaching. So I went to this training, and I met a therapist there who went to another church in town. And so we kind of connected, and I ended up going to her for counseling, because she's a therapist that summer. And one day she called me.
I was so worried that you were going to tell me that you were on your bathroom floor with suicidal thoughts, and you did this without counseling. I'm so glad that
I really only went to counseling a few times, but I did a lot of other things, a lot. I kind of did a one-on-one study with another woman that I ended up meeting that, we did a full recovery book actually together.
Okay.
And then the two of us led a group of women through that same book. So so I did that. Jeff and I went out to California actually to a marriage. It was actually an infidelity retreat kind of. It wasn't specific about sex addiction, but it was about infidelity. And we went and did a whole weekend intensive out there. So, I did do a lot of things, but I did go see her privately too. And so anyway, I kind of developed this relationship with her. I only went a few times, like I said, whenever I needed it, because I'm super duper, like I'm an annoying kind of do therapy on myself person nonstop. Like it's kind of annoying actually. But so she called me one day. I was literally scrubbing a toilet and I was crying and I was saying, God, is this okay? You brought me all this way, right? To scrub toilets? Like, what is going on? And she called me and said, hey, I need to know the name of that therapist that Jeff went to, and so I gave her the name and number of him. And she said, and when are you going to come and start working with me? And I was like, really? Like, I would love to, like yesterday. And she said, well, let's do it. And so that right there was like this weird opening for me. I had been a stay-at-home mom for 18 years. And, I really planned on going back to work more like when my youngest was, almost out of the house, kind of like another 8 years kind of a thing. And so that began a journey. So for a year, I did all of that. And I was working as a part-time as a therapist with this other friend and with her supervision. And, and I studied and I, went and took my exam and I passed my exam. It was very scary. I was so scared. I can't even tell you. All of these steps were just very scary for me, but I just kept doing it. And then that little job didn't quite last super long, but I ended up getting a job pretty quickly as a school social worker. Mm-hmm. And then I had to take a few more grad classes to get approved for that. So I did that. And so then I became fully licensed within 2 years. And so it's just, God's been amazing and I've done a lot of cool things. And now I've been doing that for 4 years. And, but I will say all of that was, I don't know how to explain it because it's like, I was doing it and it was going well and life was going okay. But like I was inside just constantly in trauma, like just always anxious, just so scared, like, oh my gosh, and all the healing work that I'd been doing on my own and with Jeff, because like you said, we had many, 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 many nights where we were literally up all night long talking, because I would make him answer every single question that I wanted answered. I'd make him answer them over and over and over again because I needed what I needed, I asked for. And the biggest, and that goes along with what I said, why I think I could heal, because he not only did he change and repent, he did whatever I asked. He just did. Whatever I needed to feel safe, whether it be boundaries with his phone or, he couldn't go somewhere without me, or I made him call an older man that was going to be at one of his trainings, I said, you have to tell him what you did and that he is now going to be your accountability partner while you're there.
Right.
So
you have to do what you have to do if you're going to work on this marriage and save it.
Yeah, exactly. And he was willing. And I think that's the biggest, I give him a lot of credit for that because it wasn't easy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, did he give up the rights to his phone? Did you have access to all of his?
I had his phone in my possession for months. And even now, now I have access to it still. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a rule. I think every husband and wife should have that rule, period.
Okay. And he didn't give you any resistance for that?
No.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, did anything show up that made you go, oh, so this person doesn't know your wife has your phone? Did that? Because I think that's in every wife's the back of her mind. Like, well, if I have his phone now.
We did have a couple of things come up. Yes. Because over the years, he definitely still had a flirting issue, so even though he may not have done something with somebody, there was a few of those that kind of trickled in a little that I responded to.
As the wife?
But he, I'm sorry?
Responded as the wife, or did you respond?
Yeah. definitely.
Good for you.
Yeah. But he really changed how he acts too. He learned a lot. Like I said, we did a lot of work together, and he understood a lot of the things he was doing, that gives the wrong impression to other people, because he was trying to get those, get people to like him. That was one of his issues. And so he talked with women in a way that I'm sure would give the wrong impression at times. So we worked on these things, and just, different boundaries and things, that you don't hug them. There's certain rules, like you don't get that right anymore, and so, yeah. And he was extremely good about all of that. Well, and there were times that he also, like, there were rules, like, he's not allowed to delete anything off his phone. So every so often, he has me do that. If he had a faltering moment or he had something happen, he told me right away. And so that built trust for me, there was even an email by the other person, by the former person. Yes. She tried to contact him via his work email, and that I replied to that again with my email. So, and we haven't had any other problems since with that. So,
and is he active on social media or no?
No, nope. Actually, that was another thing he did. Whatever social media he had, it was gone that day, gone. And it's been 5 years, and he still really doesn't have any. The only thing he's done now is Facebook Messenger, because of groups that we're in and stuff, like with sports. He's a coach and things like that. So no, he gave that up too.
Okay. Sounds like you, mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not going to paint a picture that it's been anything that would be easy, but it isn't. If you have a man that's willing to do whatever it takes to see mm-hmm. what he has, I mean, that's a sign that gives you the choice. That puts you in a powerful position to choose. Like, do I want to work with this person and fix this, or do I want to walk away? So right. He gave you something to work with. And I think that speaks a lot for his integrity, even though he did have these issues. And before we started this, you told me a little bit about something that you hit on before we even started the podcast. And I think it would be really interesting for you to talk about two things. One, you said it was really important for you to know that this was not your fault, because a lot of wives feel guilty and responsible. And the second mm-hmm. thing that you mentioned was, for your situation, your husband's situation, this was a sex addiction. This is a true addiction. And you don't, if somebody has any type of addiction, you don't label them as a bad person. You try to treat the addiction and recover from the addiction. So can you speak to those two things? One, first, about women in this position where they may be beating themselves up trying to fix it, and what their role should be when, I know everybody's story is different, but in your story especially, I thought that was powerful, because not the broken one. And then if they do have a sex addiction, we'll speak to that afterward.
Right. Well, I think first of all, I had somebody give me a book that was about infidelity. It was a Christian book kind of about infidelity. And I started reading it, and immediately it made me feel like, oh my gosh, they're telling me this is all my fault. And I mean, can I be honest and say, I literally ripped that book up into shreds and threw it all over my living room.
Good.
And made him find that, and he cleaned it up. But because I was just so like, I was just like, what? Like, I have spent the last 10 years doing everything. And I mean, everything I could to be perfect, to look perfect, to love him perfectly, to be the best mom I could be, to make him look good. Like, I've been making him look good all these years, and I'm like, what? Like, how can this even be? And so I think that my advice to others would be that, it's important to get help. Like, if you have a marriage problem, it's a communication problem or something where, everybody's got to work on something, there is that. And I'm not saying I was perfect, because I wasn't. But if there's an addiction, and I think it's important to get that determined, I guess, professionally, if you don't know, so that it can be treated in that regard, because all that did was hurt me more and traumatize me more and make me feel like I'm never going to get through this. This is all my fault. I am a terrible, worthless person. Right. And, everybody's going to think that about me. And, it's not your fault. And even if, let's say, I think it's important to note, and Jeff would tell you this, that even if, you do have some issues, or maybe there was kind of a lack of something, that everybody is responsible for their own behavior. And just because you're not a perfect spouse, that doesn't give any spouse the license to, break their vows. So, yeah. And what was the second question?
How did you determine it was sex addiction? Was that a diagnosis? Was that something that became aware after reading and counseling? And then what does that look like? If someone doesn't know the difference between somebody just having a one night stand or sex addiction, what does that look like? What does that mean?
Well, I'm not an expert on it, but I think for me, I knew it because I'd kind of been learning a little bit about it over the years, right? I mean, I read and I've been trying to educate myself about different things. And so I kind of heard about it over the years and stuff. And I knew porn was addicting. So I already knew that was in his life. And I watched patterns. I think addiction, I don't know, maybe you could speak to that too. You see patterns, right? I mean, with his issues of always over the years, I'd already been through this now several times, and he had already, kind of gotten in trouble for flirting or doing this or that, or, somebody report, there was little things that had happened over the years. And another thing is when I learned about the whole compartmentalization thing. And then I also heard, I hate to use this word, but, he really had, compulsive masturbation that he used for managing his stress. It became a habit. It was something that he did to cope with life. Mm-hmm. And he was hiding it and doing it without me knowing it, which is another sign of that.
A lot of people listening, I'm sure, have a gazillion questions, and I'm trying to anticipate what they would be. But my first question after this is, did you have an intimate relationship after this big blow up? Did you cut him off after you found out he was betraying you with a friend? Was he cut off? Did you share a bed but not have intimacy? How did you handle that? Because that's a big piece of marriage, right?
That is.
Did you allow yourself to, or did
Well, for me, it's been a journey because, and what I've learned, in like the intensives that I've been to, and in a lot of the books and studies that I've done, it's very common for it to be very erratic, actually. I don't remember the actual term, but there's a phenomenon of like where people actually do it a lot initially. Okay. I think it's like that need to feel safe, to feel like we're together. You're not going to leave me, So we kind of went through that. We've been very hot and cold. Like I have to, for me, I am just such an introspective, constant working on myself person that, we just talk about it a lot. Sometimes we just talk about it. In fact, just this week we talked about like, you know what? I need some time. I think I'm working on some things right now. And, so again, communication was key, and he let me be the leader, has always pretty much let me. And now, like I said, we're a few years out now. So, it's been a little bit looser, as far as that goes, but,
you have a safe space. He's created a space for you to feel like there's no mocking you, going, look, you can trust me already. He's not doing any of that. He's giving you the space to heal and process. And he's accommodating.
Exactly. And that's huge. I do feel blessed, not that I've been through this, but that because this time around, he was willing to do the work, that it's brought us to an even better place than we were before, ever, actually.
I love that. That's how you're on the other side. Now, the other question I have is, have you confided in your kids? Do they know?
Well, yep. They do all know now. Not initially. it's very funny because the first day or two, he lined them all up on the couch and stood, I think he was even in his uniform, and got on his knees and just sobbed in front of them and told them how sorry he was for being a bad husband and they're all just looking at him like, what's going on? Dad has lost his mind. This was such a long process of guilt and shame that I had to work through. Like, I didn't want to look at my kids. I didn't want to talk about it with them. I couldn't. It was so hard for me for a long time. Mm-hmm. Now I am very thankful that the three oldest kids, I mean, they even refer to it now, kind of like we have, praise the Lord, we've dealt with it in a healthy enough way anyway, that it's assimilated now as part of our story. And they have had to work through it too, especially the girls. They have had a really hard time, forgiving their dad. But, we talk about it and it's referred to, and they've learned from it. And so it's not like this thing that never gets referred to. That was also very difficult. I didn't want them to know, obviously, but because of their ages, it this time around that had to happen. Okay. So, and it upset me because it made me feel like, you know what, you're going to ruin my kids. Like, I mean, I was like, I worked so hard, you're ruining everything. That's how I felt initially. Sure.
Well,
we are all moving forward.
It's with any situation that happens to us, right? It's not what happens, what we do with it. And you've chosen to turn it into something beautiful. And whatever choice any woman makes, any listener, whatever situation, Lisa, your life was never on the line. You were not being physically abused. It wasn't anything like that.
Right.
Where, you and the children, where you needed to be safe. You were playing house nice. So
right. Yeah. No, we didn't have any of those concerns.
Those reasons that you had to flee for your safety. And so that this choice for you to stay is so admirable. And I think it takes a level of fierce and inner fortitude that a lot of women would say, forget that. I'm not doing it anymore. Like I'm so inspired by listening to what you managed and how you managed, that you're on the other side. And it sounds like you guys are enjoying each other.
We are
together, but also as a family, that this has turned into something beautiful. Like, hey, marriage isn't perfect and things happen. And this is what happened with your parents. And we're still working through it because we love each other. And I think that's just such a beautiful testimony.
Yeah.
To be able to share for your kids.
I agree. And one thing I did do, I ended up writing a long letter explaining to my kids a little bit about kind of where their dad came from, like sort of how he got where he got there, how he got there. This was something that he, as a kid, developed truly, and I'm not blaming, his parents per se, but I'm just saying that, a lot of his issues came from either a lack of skill development or whatever there, I essentially explained to them, how much this is worth it. And that if I can forgive him, so can you. And that, God has forgiven him too. And that is like, I just wanted them to not hate their dad. I wanted them to still love their dad and not be mad at him. So I ended up writing that letter to the older kids in hopes to encourage them that it's going to be okay. And we're good, and that, that we can do this. We can forgive. So I did do that. I also wanted to mention that my friend and I did in our recovery program that we did together was discuss, exit plans. And part of my growth and healing has been developing myself and fiercely. Okay. Where I figured out this is what I don't have to have this person. I don't have to have him to be a whole person or to be a happy person. And I worked on that in my recovery. And that is I think a really big piece of this. And I think it goes along with a lot of the things that you talk about in your work. Just that whole loving yourself, and that we don't like for me, it was like, no matter what happened, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And that's how I really was able to move forward in a relationship where I did not trust this person. I did not trust him at all. I mean, I still struggle with that, but for years I did not trust him. And so it's like, how do you build a life with a person that you don't trust? Right. Like that was super weird and hard. And I didn't like it. So I had to do a lot of this inner work on, okay, you know what? I'm holding this loosely. Like, this is what I want. I'm going to do this. I'm going to honor God. I'm going to do this for my kids, but I'm going to do it for me, because guess what? I'm going to be okay no matter what happens. So that's that. That's one of the ways I think I'm really different now than I was before, because I found my identity in being perfect. I found my identity in being the perfect wife and the perfect mom. And that's who I was. And that if I'm not that, then I'm nothing. And you know what? I could lose my whole family tomorrow, and then I'm not a mom or a wife anymore. So then what am I? Right. And so I learned that I'm okay no matter what. And I can handle anything.
Oh, that's power. I love that. I love that, because that's what we need. And when we're in the middle of when we're in the mud, we can't always see it. But if you did all the work and you start to believe it, and I know this from my personal experience, when we really believe we're going to be okay, we know it might hurt, but we know we're going to be okay. That's empowering. That's
it really, yeah.
I just love that you did that. That's awesome.
And I really think that's the best way to go ahead to move forward when you're still learning to trust, because you're right. You can't trust this person.
How are your kids now? How old are they? And what are your dreams for like your future with your husband? Like, tell me what your dream is for what you guys want to do as the kids.
What we're doing. Oh, this is one of my favorites. Okay. Well, my kids are 24, 22, 20, and 17 and 13. And so there's just 2 at home. The other 3 have moved out, and they're all doing well.
Excellent.
I'm proud of them. They're all like supporting themselves, and we still chat a lot, and they're doing great. But I work full time now, whereas, all those years I didn't. So that's been a big change for me. And he retired. So
reversed.
We kind of reversed roles a little bit, and that's been interesting, been fun. But what's really happened in this last year, I've always been a very active person. I've always loved walking and working out and things like that. Well, I finally got him to go backpacking with me last summer. We went and did like a 40-mile trip. We did Pictured Rocks, which people in Michigan would know where that is, but and we just fell in love. We have 3 trips planned this summer. We're going to, 40, 50, 60-mile trips, and we're going to go. We've been building our gear, and it's just been so much fun doing that together. And we're out training and hiking now whenever we can. And then we have the goal, when this last kid, flies the coop, where we want to go and hike the Appalachian Trail, like do a through hike, like the 6-month thing. And so we've got goals like that we really are looking forward to doing.
Fun things that you're going to do together. And I think that just inspires hope that you can be on the other side and still enjoy it and have a good time and make it worthwhile. I always like to leave our listeners with some keys that they could take if they're going through a similar story. What would a key be? 1 or 2 keys? Have you thought about that? What they could take and walk away with and apply right now? What would be something that really helped you move through this that we could close this episode with today?
I think one of my mantras has just been, you just have to keep showing up. And for me, that looked like screaming and hollering at God, screaming and hollering at my husband, frankly, hiding on my bathroom floor, doing whatever it took for me to, and every day I would get up and have my coffee and get in my chair, right? Like I just had my quiet time every day. And I would sometimes just be sobbing. I'd be screaming, whatever, because I was angry at God. And I talked to him about that a lot, because I was like, you're going to stop this. But I think that if you can just remind yourself to just keep showing up, even if it's just tiny, tiny, tiny. And so I don't really know what that looks like for every person. But maybe each person could define that for themselves. What does that mean to show up? It might just mean, taking your shower and every day. Little things like that. If you just keep showing up, God's going to keep getting you through. You just have to keep one step, whatever it is, just do the next thing. It might just be shower. Like I said, it might just be go wash a dish or, cry in your chair. But I think showing up is big, and developing your support system. Don't do it alone, not just with, if you have a faith, but your friends and family. Not everybody necessarily deserves to know your story, but you definitely need to have people that you can talk to. And sort of had these different friends. And what I found was that I would call or text different people depending on what I needed right then, how just some people are going to give you the tough love, right? Like my dad would, and some people, if I just was really hurting about a certain area that I knew that they could speak to. And then the other thing that I really liked about that is I didn't wear anybody out. I tried not to anyway. I tried not to just bug one person all the time. So I think developing your support system is huge. The other thing I would say is you can be happy. Like you can do this again, whether or not you stay married. I mean, everybody's outcomes are going to vary and all of that. But it's worth it. It's worth it because good comes again, and usually better than what you ever thought it could be.
That's a high note to end on. I mean, really, that's a great ending. I love that. And I'm so grateful that you spent the time to be so vulnerable and honest with us today. And I know that everybody that's listening that's going through a similar thing, like Lisa said, you may not have a similar result or a similar ending, but the hope and the support system and all of the things that she just shared with you it's just inspiring. And I hope you're as inspired as I am. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful that you spent this time with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Women like Lisa who share their story just in hopes that they can help one other person get through their own story are admirable. They're brave. And if you are in a situation similar to where Lisa was, I hope you found this podcast helpful. I hope you found a nugget in there that you can take and move the needle forward in your life. Lisa has made herself available for anyone who may want to reach out and chat with her. You can reach her through contacting me at fiercefunfeminine@yahoo.com. Ladies, I'm so glad you spent this time with us. Until next time, have a fierce, fun, feminine, and fabulous day.